A couple of years ago, the University of Pittsburgh's Frick Fine Arts Museum asked me to write a poem about an exhibition of Audubon bird prints and included in a reading that I did there. And I decided to do with words to Audubon what John Coltrane did with sounds to my favorite things. To turn a well-loved work of traditional art into a modernist work. So I used the language equivalents of the principles of Cubist painting to deconstruct and then reconstruct the reality of Audubon. The poem is called Imaginary Landscape with 29 Birds. And it has 29 stanzas, and the first 28 are each describe a specific bird that Audubon painted, and then a 29th, I just threw in a sculpture about a bird called Bird in Space by Konstantin Brancusi. Now, I'm going to read 6 of the birds tonight, and then I'll read the final one as well. And when I read the poem, this poem, I never name the birds, but they're right there in the book. So it's another reason to buy the book, because then you'll know what birds I'm reading about. So these are just excerpts from Imaginary Landscape with 29 Birds. Imaginary Landscape with 29 Birds. Reptile stalking, snake legs, balance, whiter, feather, arching, cruelty, ending, eyes, black, brown scissors, poking after lizard, slither. Turned away from sea cliff yearning, fledging squawkers, black and iron slivers, sparse crest move to hidden magnet wind rocks. Barnacle molds adorning branches, beak thrust and ensconcing kisses, feeding flap wings, blissful yawn. Roseated wing expanse drips, carmine deep, spoonbill wobbles, claw-gripped rock decline, to gnat soup distant islands dreary. Long brown pods of honey locust split and seedless blackness pecks at bareness, claps on pencil furling wing. One of many riding eastern hemlock, penetrating yellow bud, other hanging lanterns, other flapping celebrations. Or instead, a shining metal elongation, lusting, thrusting towards the sky, blinding color, abstract movement. Okay, now I'll take a break from poetry. I'll answer some questions if you have any. If you don't, maybe I'll deconstruct a poem, and then I'll read some of my new poems. So, any questions or comments? Gee, so that's either good or bad, right? Okay. Going, gone. Would you like me to deconstruct a poem for you and then read it? Would that be interesting? Okay. Well, the last poem in the book is called One of Repin's Volga Boatmen. And so we start with, well, who's Repin and who's the Volga Boatmen? So this poem actually starts inside a painting, and the painting is the Volga Boatmen. And what would happen, and it's actually the most famous Russian painting of the 19th century by a guy named Ilya Repin. And what would happen is during parts of the year, the Volga River would dry up, be completely dry, but the boats would still have to get through. So these boatmen, for slave wages, would hook ropes and chains onto the boats and pull them through the dry areas. And so Repin did a poem in which you see them pulling the boat through the dry area, and you see all these faces of all these really unhappy people that are just working to death, and yet some seem like they're aspiring to something. And so it's not one face you see, but many faces, all with different personalities. And I thought about those personalities. And I thought about all the different weird movements that Russia had in the 19th century. And so in some movements, people would whack their back until it became bloody. They'd flagellate themselves. And another group of people in the 19th century would sleep outside all the time. Or they would hide in secret rooms because they were called criminals by the Tsar for doing nothing but believing some weird sect of Christianity. So I just thought what I'd do is put all these people pulling this one boat. And I'd write a poem about all these different people, each representing a different weird part of society in 19th century Russia. And then I'd throw the narrator in, and there's an old story about somebody who stands for native Russia, who stands for the Russian soul, who travels underwater and then gets washed ashore. And so I thought, yes, that will be the narrator, because this is what survives. This is the Russia that survives. And also, in a way, it's the me that survives the poet, because I'm pretending to be right there with the others pulling. And so that's how you get this poem here, which starts off as a description of the painting, and then focuses on the different people that might be hauling the boat through the Volga, through the mud and the silt and the sand that was the Volga at that point. So with that, I'll read the poem, and we'll see if any of that comes out. It's called One of Repin's Volga Boatmen. Inside whites and yellows, one of many haulers dragging bandaged feet through sand, hearing casing scrape against the river bottom, first as soothing wave-like slurping, then as gritty soldier's song, a squall of waking succubus, endless drone, sun-like thrashing, slashing, slicing into pulling back, a dream of timeless towing, pilgrim rags and sweat, tug the flattened road, admire the landscape, chasing river trances into embryonic winter wheat, heavy rain descending like the ending of the world, this hour of hauling crashes with the next, this day devours itself in dying weir. Awaken as another hauler, not the one who drinks his milk on fast days, nor he who seeks in fuse of chant with flesh, flight from worthlessness, not he who carries water, bread, and salt across the steppes, sleeps outside and hides in secret rooms, nor the one parading nude before the court, nor whacking bloody welts on back and legs. I am a merchant on the way to colder regions, exploring underwater kingdoms for truths I can keep and also barter, washing ashore with golden fish in an unknown land. So what did you guys think of that? Did that explanation help at all? To enjoyment of the poem? Right, yeah. Well, actually, that's what I hope, is that whether, sometimes I do have illusions, and whether you get them or not, you enjoy the poem. Any questions now, or shall I go to some newer stuff? Okay.